with codes that we were here to crack. We're here to crack certain codes, and that is actually through those shadowy aspects of ourselves that we talked about a little bit before hopping on here. Those things that we harbor shame around, that is the source of our greatest power. And so it's this initiation when we step forward and we claim, I'm no longer available for shame and for these fear-based identities because they're not mine. And those codes that I was here to learn were around, self-worth. And when it came to, disordered eating, like stop shrinking myself through my eating disorder and body dysmorphia. I stopped using alcohol to numb and really rethinking my relationship to substance and noticing how by me drinking alcohol, it was preventing me from being able to drink in life and really taste all of life's flavors and experience this human journey head on without any sort of distraction.
Welcome to Create Love with Carrie Margaret. I'm here to help you find and create the story of you, your authenticity, your love, your life. We live in a shifting culture where men and women don't know how to act, to find authentic self-expression, connection, and love. Let's remove the fear around expressing femininity and masculinity and come to a greater understanding of each other and build connection based on authenticity and attraction and being a team instead of adversaries. There's room for every type of life story and love story. You get to be the hero of your own story. Let me walk with you to create understanding, face fears, deconstruct attraction and passion, heal old wounds and grief, and show up as the person, lover, partner, and friend that you are here to be.
Hello, this is Carrie Margaret, and welcome today to the Create Love podcast. And I have such a treat for you today. My friend Tyler Rowling of Brave Spaces, who is a transformational leadership coach and has such a rich story of expressing creativity and really multi-passionate creativity. And I'm really excited for all of the tips and the nuggets that you will get about being in your authentic power and the light and the beauty and the expression that you can bring out into the world. So thanks for joining us, and thank you so much for joining us, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carrie. Yeah, thank you for inviting me into this space and into this conversation. Yeah.
So let's dive in. You have a really fascinating story, a really multi-passionate creative woman. And can you tell us a little bit about, what brought you to where you are today with your Brave Spaces coaching and the way that you share in the world?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Brave Spaces was really created in response to my own evolution and identity shift that took place over the past couple years. My first group coaching program was called Food, Body, and Soul. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, certified intuitive eating counselor, but I'm also a lot of other things. And I realized that by pigeonholing myself in one sort of silo, it was really suffocating my creativity and not allowing me to step forward in that next cycle of my evolution. And I'm trying to think of where to even begin because I feel like it's an ongoing process. And when we think about our life as our art, right? Like, it's not about the end, and I know this is so cliche, but it's not about the end destination, it's about the journey. And I think we get so caught up in, well, I'll be happy when this happens. Or once I get there, then life will be smooth sailing and like it's all good. And what if instead of seeing that life is moving in the direction of chaos, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Chaos is at the root of evolution. I can't think of any time in my life, and I'm sure you can relate to this, where you were going through transformation and you didn't feel like the ground beneath you was crumbling. You know, we think about in 2020 with the pandemic and all these things happening, and just collectively this tower moment of the systems as we know it, a tower moment crumbling, really unstable and chaotic. And it's so human for us to want to grasp onto what we know to feel safe. But being brave is about leaping forward into the unknown and embracing it and seeing it as this amazing adventure. Falling in love with the unknown. I love the unknown. This is a mantra I've been telling myself. I love uncertainty. I love not knowing. And I love being brave, and I love being able to make choices not related to an end result, but in the moment to moment. Like this exchange we're having right now is such a beautiful opportunity for expression, to get to talk about our stories, which will probably evolve yet again, you know, and be different again next week and the week after. And so I created Brave Spaces as a space to liberate fear and dance to the rhythm of change and choose bravery over perfection.
I love that so much. And the frame of bravery over perfection, as in conversations we've talked about this thing of moving past whether it, you know, dependency to an outside thing, whether it's a substance or codependent relationship or perfection or whatever else, and moving into that bravely. And I want to talk about that a bit. It's such a core thing that I feel that so many people experience in this human experience of, you know, moving out of some of the numbing or the need to control. And what we were actually just talking about that a little bit in another conversation right before we started recording. What would you like to share about that, and kind of at the root of that sense of codependency with something else, or addiction or perfection? That we've both been on those journey, or on that journey.
Totally. It's a daily practice. Daily practice. I like to think of, you know, how much life can I fit into this life? How much life can I fit into this life? What needs to transform in order for me to step forward in my evolution? The frequency of maintenance versus the frequency of evolution. And not because your life isn't good right now, but because it's so natural for the feminine, especially, to desire more. And so instead of looking at it as I'm a problem that needs to be fixed, we think about, how can I fit more life into this life by letting go of fear-based patterns and identities? So transformation is not about changing who you are. It's about becoming more of who you are by letting go of these fear-based patterns and identities that were never yours to begin with. And it's my belief that we're all born with codes that we were here to crack. We're here to crack certain codes, and that is actually through those shadowy aspects of ourselves that we talked about a little bit before hopping on here. Those things that we harbor shame around, that is the source of our greatest power. And so it's this initiation when we step forward and we claim, I'm no longer available for shame and for these fear-based identities, because they're not mine. And those codes that I was here to learn were around self-worth. And when it came to, disordered eating, like stop shrinking myself through my eating disorder and body dysmorphia. I stopped using alcohol to numb and really rethinking my relationship to substance and noticing how by me drinking alcohol, it was preventing me from being able to drink in life and really taste all of life's flavors and experience this human journey head on without any sort of distraction. And then another code that I came here to crack is around codependent partnerships and sort of chasing emotionally unavailable men. And then another code, which I actually haven't spoken as openly about because I'm very much in the middle of it right now, is around financial wellness and financial freedom and my relationship to consumerism and sort of this capitalistic society that we're all born into. And I think there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do around our relationship to money too. So that's why when I say multi-passionate, it's like we are multi-dimensional. We're not just one thing. And that's why I'm not a fan of those elevator pitches where it's like, I'm Tyler and I help so-and-so by . And it's like my embodiment and my expression and how I move through life, that is the medicine that we're here to give to others. It's not through, yes, we can go to seminars and we can improve certain skill sets, but at the end of the day, it's my belief that our medicine and purpose is found behind those things that we're hiding behind, that harbor shame and fear. And that's why Brave Spaces is all about liberating fear. Empowerment, transformation, and liberation. Yeah.
I love that. I love the diving right into the liberating fear and the places where we feel shame. I mean, I don't know if it's Brene Brown's work or somebody else. I'm not precise.
Brene Brown, for sure.
On the reference, but that when you share, I think it is Brene, that she says that when you share in an empathetic space, the shame, it dissolves.
Right.
You know, it dissolves in the light.
Yeah.
And it's almost like one of the things that I've been playing with is like, how can I love all of the dark spaces? Yeah. How can I love the shame? And so that in just sharing it empathetically, it dissolves. It makes me want, this is an impromptu thing, but it makes me want to just be like, oh, one of the codes that I'm uncracking, I want to share that too. It feels really alive right now. It's like one of the codes, a lot of them I've resonated with. And one of the codes that I'm uncracking is this whole thing of like worth and value in terms of appearance as a woman, or, you know, the inability, like that it's not okay to get older. It's not okay to look different. When we're younger, it was like this idea of like, there was this projected idea of what was the right way to look and to be, and it seemed like some worth was tied up into all of that. Like,
totally.
And it's really like every time that I get into those scripts in my head, which are social scripts, and we pick up these ideas from society around them, every time I feel like I'm giving my power away. Like, is my worth about what somebody else thinks about what I look, what I do, how I live, all of those things. The thing about looks, I think for women, and I like to speak to my own experience, and I think that some of these experiences are universal experiences, but it's just like when I give my power away, but thinking about how what somebody else is perceiving the way that I look on a particular day, and whether or not I look tired or a little bit older oh, wouldn't it be terrible if I looked a little bit older? You know? Or when I was younger, wouldn't it be terrible if I put on a bathing suit and all of a sudden my belly was hanging out over the bathing suit? Wouldn't that just be such a terrible thing?
Yeah.
And, you know, all of that, like, the shame and like for me there's layers of it, because then there's the layers of the shame with all the personal development. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have any of those thoughts anymore. You know, I should be able to like just be fully in my own sovereign worth and beauty all the time, like the radiator and connected to source. And then that's another condition. The other condition is like, oh, now that I've learned this, rather than being in my messy human experience, and like all the beautiful men or women that are listening to, men have their, you know, their own stories,
right.
But women that are listening, that it's like, oh, all of a sudden that we realize this, now we have to like we have to go to perfect, getting back to the perfectionism.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it just felt right to kind of share one that, like, as a woman navigating the world of, you know, where everybody was, it just felt like so many people were putting value in appearance. Another one is like your energy, you know, when you're somebody who spends a lot of time in cultivating good feelings and good energy, it's like, oh, then you can't show up without good energy. You know, like always in this space of, rather than like, I'm this messy human being.
Totally.
And, you know, like today I'm cranky and tired and have bags under my eyes and look a little bit older. So there you go.
Yeah, I like to think that belonging, which is so fundamental and at the core of every human being, is the need to belong. And I'm actually reading a book right now called Belong by Radha, and I'm forgetting her last name, but it's just such a beautiful book. And she talks about how, you know, we have to belong to ourselves first. And I think we are so conditioned to seek that external validation, especially as women, because female bodies are objectified on a daily basis. It's gotten better, given, but there's still a lot more work to do. And sometimes we have to go in before we can go out and get to know ourselves so deeply and so intimately. And it's not just like a one-time thing. This is like a daily practice of going in so that you can go out into the world. Not from a place of, I need validation, I need you to tell me that I look okay, that everything's gonna be okay, but that you create that sense of safety within yourself so that you become unshakable amidst whatever's happening around you. And I don't know if I already said this or if we were talking about it beforehand, but I'll just say it again. And that is, life is moving in the direction of chaos. And not that chaos means that it's bad or negative, but that is the frequency of evolution, is you shake shit up and it feels a little chaotic. And that's the feminine too, is chaos, right? And so it's not about getting rid of those moments that we feel sort of chaotic in our inner world or chaos in the outer world, but it's how we navigate and ride the waves. And I almost think of like, you know, you're out in the middle of a storm and like instead of running for shelter, you're like out there just like, I have this image of Tom Hanks from whatever that movie was where he was on the stranded island, you know, and he's just like, like that sort of energy. What was that called? With the FedEx when he gets stranded on that movie called? Wilson.
Put it in the comments below. What is it? Yeah, it'll come to us. Yeah.
Anyways, he gets to that point, right, where it's just like, you know, here we go, like take me sort of thing, and that's the energy. that it's almost like we face our shadow with that sort of oomph. Yeah.
I love that so much. What comes in with that for me too, besides the movie reference, is that when I was
Castaway.
Yes, Castaway, that's it. Besides that movie reference is, in my last year in college, I studied abroad in Venezuela, and I hitchhiked down South America, and it's like this whole relationship with like uncertainty of just, not that I'm recommending that anybody does that right now. I'm just saying that, like, it just like embracing the chaos and the uncertainty of that. I found that sensation I found so frequently in travel. And exploring the world.
Sure.
And like loving that uncertainty and the chaos of whatever is going to unfold. And the trust that whatever unfolds is going to be okay.
Right.
And the deep trust in self too was really interesting about that phase of my life, and is the deep trust in self and discernment. I wasn't hitchhiking alone. I was hitchhiking with a group, but there was still a level of discernment of like, this is safe and that isn't safe. And actually, at that time, it was a bit of time ago, but at that time, in so many small towns and villages all over Latin America, the way that people would get around is through hitchhiking. So there's this cultural phenomenon of rides, of these short rides. So this thing that seems so dangerous was actually fairly safe because there's this cultural way that people moved, and it's just almost like grabbing onto this other culture, this other way of movement. Jumping into that level of uncertainty and just like completely embracing it. And I love how you're bringing in, like, I don't know, everybody's listening, if you can think of a moment or bring up a moment where you felt that level of surrender and just like trust and that castaway moment, and just facing there's an exhilaration and a braveness.
Total brave. And courageousness that it takes, for sure.
I would love to get in, like, so you're this very multi-passionate woman, and, been on this journey as have I, on moving through things like codependent relationships and these different patterns. And one of the things I really love about your story and moving forward the world is how you've evolved in being in your authentic truth and calling in your beautiful partnership that you're in right now. So can you share a little bit about like that and how that felt to step into that with your, authentic, brave voice, like the owning of self that probably allowed your partner to come in and own all those parts of you. Or be with all those parts of you.
Totally. That whole belonging to myself first, so that I can also belong with someone else too, because I totally was in a pattern in the past of codependent partnerships and really just not anchored to the core of who I was. And for me, becoming alcohol free really changed that, because there was this part of my identity throughout my 20s that was like life of the party, and like I said, identity shift happening through just being like, nope, that's not it. And when I met my partner, it was a little over a year being alcohol free, and I was really calling in a partner that would be able to meet me where I was and want to walk the path of growth and evolution. I wasn't here for maintenance. I'm here to grow with my beloved as individuals and also within the context of our container that we create. And I knew that I had to go about it differently than I had in the past. And so we did this thing where I was like, all right, worst foot forward. Instead of best foot forward in the beginning, let's put our worst foot forward right now. Like, what are those things that you feel shame around? I'll go first, And so that was one of the first conversations that we had, was around, like, I struggled with substance misuse. I, was in a lot of debt financially, and I've been re-evaluating and totally reworking my relationship to finances, financial wellness. And, growing up with two parents that filed bankruptcy, and just like noticing all these stories, and a mom who was alcoholic, and how we talked about those codes that we're here to crack. And it's like, oh, well, that makes sense, and not blaming my parents, but really taking that empowerment approach of like, it ends here. Let's do this. And letting my partner know that, potential partner, right off the bat, like, hey, I'm imperfect, but I am so willing to lean in and do the work. I am so ready and here for that. Are you? And it's also a daily practice, right, of vulnerability, and being able to notice when you get caught up in those patterns where your nervous system, you get triggered, and maybe you shut off, close off, or you have that anxious attachment. That's me, big time. Working towards secure attachment, but there are times where the anxious little girl in me gets really scared and wants to grasp. And so I get to hold her first. I get to call on my inner masculine to hold her and nurture her, and simultaneously be with a partner who can co-regulate with me, who's open to that. And I've been really blessed and fortunate to be with a partner who's willing to lean in and do the work. And they also know their patterns and have done enough work on themselves to have that awareness. And creating love, not from a place of everything needs to be perfect, but do we get to love one another even amidst our imperfections and our messiness? And that can be tough. Yeah. I wrote a post the other day on my Instagram. That's a social media platform I'm on quite a bit. Yes, I'm a millennial. and it was a video of Joshua and I, and just a beautiful moments from a trip that we took together over the holidays. And you want to know if you're compatible with someone, you go travel with them and you know pretty quickly how you navigate one another and all your different shades of human. And I wrote something along the lines of, I thought that once I was healed, then I'd be able to enter partnership. Once I was over my anxious attachment style, then I'd find my king. And it's like, nice try, Ty, but that's just not how it works. Anytime you are in a partnership, your attachment wounds will be activated. And I like to think of life as a spiral where certain lessons come back, just different flavors, and how we respond is where the growth happens. And it's been a beautiful journey of deepening into those areas that feel really stretchy and so vulnerable, terrifying, but at the same time, so freeing. And just kind of going back to that mantra or saying of our source of our shame and vulnerability is also the source of our greatest power. And so letting it be known and being able to share it in partnership, I think, is really how you create love. Yeah.
I'm curious about your experience of this, and what you think, how you're experiencing that dance between sharing the vulnerable, shameful moments and then creating the adventures, and how that dance is feeling to you.
I love dance as a metaphor in relationship because it's so true. There can be like push pull, or like sometimes you're feeling it and there's flow, and other times you're like stepping on each other's feet and you're like, what's going on? There's friction here. And navigating the dance, I feel like in the context of the partnership I'm in right now, is noticing when we sort of spiral into the negative emotions and get stuck in this dark hole together. It's like one person's down in the dark hole and you kind of bring them down with you. And it's like, how long are we going to sit in this hole, this darkness together, before we come out and start to cultivate more positive emotions and experiences together? So I do think there's a consciousness and awareness we have to bring to how often are we diving into the depths and shadowy parts without also celebrating and being in these quote unquote positive, more expansive emotions together. And I think it might be John Gottman. Are you familiar with John Gottman and his work? I love him.
Yeah.
And it might be him that says this around, for every one like negative experience, you want to have 4 positive to sort of balance it out, so you're not just constantly processing all the time with your partner, which can literally be exhausting. And I've totally been there where I just want to process, and I notice how it's like you're running in circles. You're not really getting anywhere because you haven't given the relationship and container space to like breathe and sort of create space for that stuff to move through. And something that Joshua and I do are we create intentional time around talking about like what's present. We call it a right relations. We don't always meet at the time that we say we're going to, and that's okay. But the intentionality is there and the conversations are had. And it's been so much fun being able to grow and evolve with someone. Like for me, relationship is where some of the most potent growth happens. And I think for many of us.
Yeah, there's a quote like, we're harmed in relationship and we heal in relationship.
Yeah.
And they're also just such a vehicle for growth and for creativity. Yeah. I love that share there. It's interesting how the same Gottman principle. I was just actually talking with somebody on Glenn Ackerman in another podcast episode about this thing of for every one negative experience, you should have 4 positive experiences. And my tendency is then to want to flood. So I'll be like, instead of 4 positive, I'm going to give it 10 positive to myself and to others. So it's like, it's really edged out, and I love the comfortability of like taking that space of being in the shadow that I'm feeling in this space with you. Like we were just talking about this thing of, I'm not sure if we brought it into this conversation. We were talking about how we transmit our energy and who we are and who we're being. You're saying that like it is medicine for people.
Yes.
Like we just our very presence.
Yes.
And I love, even in the context of this conversation, it's like within me, I'm thinking like, Carrie, could you be a little bit more comfortable with bringing a little bit more of the shadow?
Yeah.
Like just letting that more of the mess. And I like the intentionality of the sort of check in with that.
Yeah. And it's so tough. We can talk about it, but when you're in it, that's where the brave action and choosing bravery over perfection, I think, is so key. Because I've totally been there where I notice I'm triggered or something surfaces, and my habitual response is to close off and say, I'm fine. I'm fine. Yes, we've all been there, you know, where it's just like, don't want to ruffle any feathers, don't want to do it, just gonna do my thing, and it's all good, you know? And of course, the words don't match my energy, and Joshua is so intuitive and sensitive, he knows that. He's like, everything's not fine, you know? But stepping into this space of my partner isn't a mind reader, and my power comes from me being able to voice my truth and detach from how he's going to respond. And I think that's where I started shifting, was because by me thinking about how I was going to respond, it really was about trying to control how he would interact with me. And so just letting go of that control of like, regardless of how he responds, I've got myself. And it goes back to this knowing thyself and belonging to oneself so intimately that you can share that with someone else from a place of authenticity, not from a place of, well, let me put on this facade that everything's fine so that way you'll love me no matter what. It's like, that's not sustainable. Where did we learn that? Oh, I got that because that's in my childhood, how I coped with my upbringing. So much inner child work, and sometimes I like to visualize even my inner child interacting with my partner, because sometimes it actually feels like that's what's happening. And can we name it for what it is? Yeah.
And I this brings up some curiosity for me about how you're experiencing the same phenomenon in your creativity. You're really multi-passionate, creative person, and you do synchronized swimming, which I think is so fun. It is so fun. I remember the picture of you dressed up as a mermaid, even though that wasn't actually in the pool. So synchronized swimming, and then the creative shares and social media. There's the creative, coaching.
Totally.
There's just creativity that I don't, know all of the different elements of where that comes out. And I'm really interested because I notice with myself, the way that I show up to myself is the way that I show up to other people. The way that I show up to myself and other people is the way that I show up to my creativity and my work. It's like there's this, there's a really, I want to source where I got this idea from, and it'll come to me. But there's this really interesting idea in attachment theory of like, and those of you who are like deep into attachment theory, that's like how we form connections. And somebody shared this idea with me that the way that we form a connection, so there can be secure attachment, anxious, avoidant, disorganized, fearful. There's a whole spectrum of that, even beyond like the major, four that people talk about a lot in attachment theory. But that translates also into how we show up and organize our work and our creativity and all these different things, because we're forming these relationships with the world. And so I'm really curious about how that inner child and how all of these things shows up in your creative expression, if that's showing up for you in that space. Because even though we do have these similar relationships, we can have spaces where we show up, where we notice more different elements of our multifaceted, humanness, right? And being. So I'm curious about that with the synchronized swimming and the creativity, how that shows up for you.
Yeah, I love that. That makes so much sense. And it kind of goes back to this fear of, if I express my full authentic self, will I be accepted? And it comes back to that wanting to be loved, that sense of belonging. And so much of creativity is bravery, because it's something that no one else is doing. You're literally paving your own path and just claiming that you're one of the crazy ones. Like, you're just one of the weird ones, and there's your tribe out there that also is like, that's amazing what you're doing. And of course, there's also going to be other people who judge you for it, but it doesn't matter because you belong so fully to yourself and you're so committed to your craft that, and when I say craft, that doesn't necessarily mean painting or synchronized swimming, but your craft being showing up and your embodied authentic self-expression every day, that your life is your art. And synchronized swimming just gets to be one outlet for me to express myself. And that began when I was 7 years old. Even before 7, I was allowed to join the team when I was 7, but I was even in the pool when I was like 3 years old, trying to do moves and dance in the water and all that. But there is something to be said about expression, whether it's through writing or movement or creating video or whatever outlet you resonate with. In my experience, when I step into those spaces of creativity and expression, I feel life force energy moving through me. I feel so alive. And it makes me sad when I think about people who suffocate their creativity or they claim, oh, I'm not creative, when really as humans we're innately creative. And yeah, opening ourselves up to expression and what wants to move through us and at any given moment. And detaching from whether or not it looks good, how it sounds, does it make any sense? It doesn't matter if it makes any sense. Most likely it will not. And the beautiful part is too, is like each time we take that brave action and we do it anyway, it's like we refine our craft. Clarity doesn't come through like sitting and thinking about what we're gonna do. I like to think that clarity comes through taking the messy, brave action and choosing bravery over perfection. And thinking about how like each action is like a building block for our life. And yeah, there was a time in my life where I thought about, well, I'm gonna stop telling people that I do synchronized swimming because like I feel embarrassed about it. That actually happened like not that long ago. When I was going through this like identity shift and rebrand from Food, Body, and Soul to Brave Spaces, I was like, I was actually thinking like, well, why would I post videos of me in a mermaid suit if that has nothing to do with Food, Body, and Soul? And then I thought, I'm done with the niche. Like, I'm just done because I want to be able to express myself and share that with others. So, yeah.
I love that so much. I love that the vulnerability of the share of pretty recently. I was thinking through that, and then also, I mean, that your synchronized swimming and like you in the mermaid costume has been such a point of connection for like me to you. Like just it's hard for me to articulate in this precise moment how that happens. It's just it makes you so multidimensional.
Yeah, thank you.
It does, I mean, there's this, without getting into criticizing the masks, or these kind of like masks and kind of like plasticness of, I talked about aesthetics earlier.
Yeah.
And there's a certain aesthetics that kind of has this really shiny aspect, and my experience of that feels a little bit, well, I want you to be fully expressed. So if that's the way that you feel amazing, go ahead and do it. Do all of the things. And, you do you, boo. You do you, boo. But like, even like the really, like for me, like I have made the choice not to inject my body with things
Right.
And like the shininess of like Botox, like the Botox forehead is very shiny. And there's something about me being able to experience people and like all of the flavors of them and not the magazine glossiness and the synchronized swimming. I mean, part of that is very magazine and glossy because it is kind of this older world glamour.
Totally.
And there is this flavor to it. There's this flavor. It's like wanting the flavor.
Yeah.
Wanting to be able to look into your eyes and like see the depth of all of the colors, because Tyler has these eyes that have like, they're like greenish, and then there's some blue, and then there's like a little bit of like hazel in there, and there's like all this depth in it, and being able to experience the depth. And for me, like the synchronized swimming is part of like the depth of who you are.
Totally. Thank you.
And been a real connecting point. And so it's just like, then it's like, and moving through that, and even the admitting the insecurity, like I don't want to put words on you, but that's the questionness or the insecurity or the doubt of whether or not that fits. And it's like, can you imagine stripping away some of the beautiful colors in your eyes? You know, like they're so deep and beautiful and bright.
Yeah.
And
likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And giving us all that permission to, be all the flavors of us.
Be brave. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it didn't last too long. I was just like, that again, when the fear and the doubt kicks in, that's where leadership also comes forward. It's like, how am I going to lead myself through this? Oh, this is mean girl mindset. The mean girl mindset of judgment, perfection, and comparison. Versus the soul sisters. This is in the book Belong. She talks about walking the cafeteria of our mind. And are you going to sit with the mean girls? Are you going to sit with your soul sisters? And your mean girls are comparison, perfectionism, and criticism or judgment. And soul sisters are curiosity, compassion, and I can think kindness is the other one. And I love that metaphor so much. So it's like, walking the cafeteria of my mind. I think we've all been there in middle school where you're like, who am I going to sit with? That's like terrifying. Right? And so, that's mean girl mindset. We just get to call it like it is. We're not, when I want to shrink, I choose to expand. And my medicine is my multidimensionality. My medicine is the fact that I'm multi-passionate and I have all these different layers to me and I'm constantly evolving. Who you meet today is probably going to be different tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And that is art and that's beautiful.
I love that so much. Yeah. I want to ask you as we sort of like get towards the end of our conversation. There's a question that I ask all my guests, and it is, what for you is great love?
Great love? Great love. Great love for me is being able to expose every part of myself and be celebrated for it. Not just tolerated, but actually celebrated. And embracing the imperfection and creating great love through bravery, through vulnerability. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Is there anything else about, in a second I want you to share how people can get to know more about you, dive into your world, your Instagram, all these things. And before that, is there anything else you want to share from our conversation today? Anything else that comes to mind?
I think we got some really juicy stuff. Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, it feels like a really juicy conversation. So I feel complete.
Yeah, I do too. So good. So where can our listeners and our viewers find out more about your world?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways that you can plug into the Brave Spaces community. The first one is you can check me out on Instagram at @TylerRolling_. You can also check out my website, tylerrolling.com, and join my newsletter. I have a private Facebook group called Brave Spaces. And then I also have a podcast, Brave Spaces, that is on Spotify and Apple Podcast. So a few different ways.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, such a pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate your beingness, your energy, just the way that you show up and the art that you're creating with your life.
Oh, thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, and wishing you so much love and creativity on your journey today.
Mwah!